Thank you, Oke, and welcome, Laura.
Thank you.
We first met on Zoom about, was it 2 days ago? And I just felt we had so much in common. And you described, I asked you how you wanted to be described, and you said you are a lifelong activist and musician, as well as the founder of Musicians Without Borders. Now, we're going to hear about Musicians Without Borders, but let's hear first about the lifelong activist and musician. When did music start for you, and how?
Well, my parents were both social activists working for a peace organization, peace and human rights organization, and they both were singers. They both loved singing. I often say that I think that if they had been born or come of age in a different period, they might both have become musicians. My mother was certainly going to be a dancer. But they grew up during the Depression in New York City, and then during the World War II, the beginning, and all the way through, of course. And they chose to go into social activism. They were both pacifists, they were activists, and they were always singing. Mm-hmm. And after the end of the war, together with a few other couples, they founded a cooperative living community, which is where I grew up. And that attracted people who were involved in all kinds of social activism. This is the time of the liberation movements in Africa, in Latin America, around the world, in peace building. But it also attracted artists and musicians, both amateur and professional. And so people were always making music, and I had my first piano lessons from a neighbor. I had to walk through the woods to get to her home. And the conductor of the local suburban symphony was also a neighbor who was a classical violinist. And so you just had music around you all the time. We sang all the time. I was the one who led the singing in the school bus every day, an hour one way and an hour the other way. And at the same time, my parents were working with these major movements, with the civil rights movement. My father worked to support the work of Martin Luther King in the southern states of the United States. And what always came back to me was how strong singing was in that movement, especially singing, coming out of the black church, connecting people, telling stories, and giving people courage, because it was dangerous to be a civil rights activist in that time. But when you sang together, you felt like you had a kind of strength from each other. And I'm sure everybody here understands that, the ways in which music can connect you, but also create a special kind of bond and a kind of solidarity among people. So this was just a picture. This is me at the age of 15, I believe. And the other person in the picture is Bayard Rustin. And Bayard Rustin was Martin Luther King's main strategist, and he was also the person who planned the famous March on Washington when Martin Luther King gave his I Have a Dream speech, which I attended as a 15-year-old. And also, then we were singing all the time. So there was that kind of message. And then in my student years, the big issue that my parents were working on was the war in Vietnam. And this is a picture of me singing at a demonstration in Philadelphia around 1970, 1971, something like that. So there was always this mixture of music and the power of making music together and what it could do to change.
This is the big question, isn't it? Can music change the world? And there are all sorts of views on that. There's, or can art change the world? There's the Bertolt Brecht quote that you might know that came, I'm not sure where it originated, but it's quoted by Luciano Berio in the Sinfonia, that, all this can't stop the wars or can't make the price of bread cheaper. But in what ways do you think that, it clearly, it can't have an immediate effect, but the idea that you just said gives people courage, and it's a feeling of togetherness. Is that what you think it's about, the idea of music and change? Is it identity as well?
It can be identity, of course. It can give a feeling of safety for people who feel like they're in danger because of who they are or where they're living or what's happening around them, of course. It can be a way to access, I think this is one of the things that we've seen in many of our projects to access a sense of complex identity. When you've lived through a war or an armed conflict, or you're in forced migration, very often your identity gets reduced to that one piece of your identity which is determining that. If you grow up in Kosovo, you're either a Serb or an Albanian. But the fact that you might also be a great carpenter, a good parent, or a great drummer, making music sort of opens up that possibility. But also, like any powerful force, music can be used also to connect one group of people against another, and has been, including in the places where we live, which is one of the reasons that I always go back to my youth and to those principles of nonviolence, which include do no harm, for example, the principles of human rights. So as a kind of a conscience, and we know we're sharing powerful tools with people, we're sharing powerful ways of connecting. Let's make sure that those are all going for the good.
So this lifelong musician and lifelong activist, I guess this crystallized 25 years ago when you set up Musicians Without Borders. What was your immediate impetus to do that at that time?
That was 1999, and it was during the last of the horrible Balkan Wars. This was in Kosovo, was the final of these wars. It just so happened, I love many kinds of music. For a while I was conducting a chamber choir, and I also had vocal groups, and one of my vocal groups sang, among other things, folk music from the Balkans, which I loved. Because of lots of things, because of the way women use their voices, because of the way you can hear sort of the crossover of Eastern and Western cultures in the complex rhythms and the harmonies, and so we were singing this beautiful music, and meanwhile seeing daily reports of burned out villages in the places where this music came from, and streams of refugees. And so I was invited in the city I live in to produce a war memorial concert on the 4th of May, which is the traditional annual recognition and honoring of war victims, originally World War II, but of course that's expanded. And so instead of doing a Mozart requiem, for example, we sang folk songs from the Balkans, and from all different kinds of languages, all different peoples, and basically the message, if you will, of that concert was everybody sings lullabies to their kids. And it's always the ordinary people who get caught in the crossfire. And after that concert, there was this sense among a number of the musicians. Many of us had also been working within the Netherlands for connection between people who had no connection with each other, or between people from sort of the dominant ethnic Dutch group and newcomers. And we all felt like maybe we could do something with this. And so I went back to my old peace movement background, and I contacted actually the Dutch sort of office of the same organization that my parents had worked for, and I said, hey, could we do something as musicians? And sort of to my surprise, they said, come on over. And before we knew it, within 2 weeks of that concert, we had a free office, we had the use of a computer, we had a telephone, we had some advice, we had access to a bank account. And within a couple of months, we were renting buses and traveling to refugee camps in the Netherlands, which were sheltering refugees from Kosovo. And another 3 months further, and we were in Sarajevo. And each of those is a long story, but,
But this is the power
that's how it started.
This is the power of a very good idea at the right time. So now, just fast forwarding to now, you have this organization which is at work in a number of different conflict zones around the world. I think this might be a good time to see your short
Should we show the little
video?
Yeah.
Short introductory video to Musicians Without Borders.
Oh, that's us singing ourselves across a border in
nice.
Croatia. Forgot to tell that story. It's all right.
One, two, three, four. Mama told me she's a criminal.
Music is powerful. It can influence behavior. shape culture, and strengthen social bonds. With 2 billion people living in fragile, conflict-affected states, Musicians Without Borders uses music to address the needs of divided societies.
My name is Sophie. I'm a Palestinian, and that's my trophy. I have my own rights.
Music can help heal the wounds of war and rediscover connections. The voices of the unheard are raised with music. And it's music that's the collective voice for social justice and peace building. Musicians Without Borders is a global network, engaging with artists, changemakers, and communities spread worldwide. We share expertise with our diverse programs in some of the world's most vulnerable communities. And we work closely with local musicians and organizations in response to local needs. So Musicians Without Borders impacts thousands of young men and women and older people every day, all through music. Music is a stepping stone towards lasting social change. Musicians Without Borders will continue to use music as a tool to build connections, foster empathy, and transform communities. Today and every day, join us in opposing war and stand with us for peace through music. Musicians Without Borders. War divides, music connects.
No one has the right to hurt me.
Beautiful, amazing.
Thank you. That whole soundtrack, by the way, was spliced together from our various projects. It's all from the work. Yeah.
Absolutely wonderful. There was one phrase in there which is was about the voices of the unheard. I mean, that's one important aspect, I guess, of what you are doing is that there are people without voices, and it's attempting to give a platform, allow people to be heard who might not otherwise.
Yes, exactly. And there's also a point about John-Paul Lederach, who is an amazing scholar and teacher of peace building, and has written many books, and he's a very interesting thinker. I heard him at the very beginning, and he was on the board of Court Aid in The Hague, and I heard him speaking about how it's important how peacemakers, peace builders, people who negotiate, people who end conflicts, need to think more like artists. Because artists, as he put it, are used to expecting the unexpected and working with it and taking risks and being creative. And he was pleading for peace builders to be more like artists. And I was thinking, well, but artists can also be peace builders. Let's turn it on its head, because we've got all of those things. And we can see, and he also talks about sometimes people have been through such terrible experiences that talking about them is too difficult. But music is a way that you can express those feelings, get them out, share them. You don't have to be writing songs about that incident, but to be able to express who you are again. And I think that's one of the key things that unites our very different projects with each other.
So you've put, there's a slide up there which I think this is your, what is this, your
the so-called mission statement.
Mission statement, yes.
Yeah, the power of music to bridge divides, support communities, connect communities, and heal wounds of war. That's how we've distilled it, and how we talk about it. Just to summarize, you have to, these days you have to be able to say things in 10 words.
Yeah, and then what are the next slides? Are they
I forget.
linked to that? Yeah,
Oh,
so these are principles, are they?
Yeah, I guess, if you ask me, and we, different people within our organization have sort of different sets of things which at different levels. We have the 5 principles that we talk about in the more community music type of projects. To me, these are the large overriding truths, and almost like the conscience, the power of music, obviously, which I have experienced all of my life, and all the musicians around me probably recognize. the principles of active nonviolence, I referred to that earlier, as a kind of conscience, and the idea of universal human rights, by the way, principles which are being violated these days every day and ignored and degraded, including by our countries, as we all probably know in this ongoing genocide. But to me, these are kind of like a compass for why are you doing what you are doing, and how do you look and how do you check back and make sure you're still okay, that if you're teaching songwriting in Rwanda to a group of young people and children, that it's not going to be used as it was during the genocide to write angry songs about the other group.
Yeah.
For example, okay, check back. What are those? What is that basis? What are these sort of universal things that, to my mind, moral leaders have come up with? It might not be the perfect solution to everything, but this is the best that we've come up with, I think, up to now. This nonviolence, which includes, it doesn't just mean not being violent. It means being proactively standing together in solidarity with victims, with people who are being discriminated against or being oppressed. And it means doing no harm, and it means searching for the truth, and it means telling the truth as you see it.
So can we talk about some projects that mean a lot to you at the moment that you think are particularly urgent? There's a film that we watched together earlier today, which the project is in some difficulty for reasons that will become very apparent, but it seems to be something that's absolutely urgent at the moment.
Yes.
What are we going to see?
So this is a short video that was made a little more than a year ago in Bethlehem, which is on the West Bank, which is in Palestine. And we've been working there since 2008 with different groups of people, not always children, but children, young people, sometimes mothers who have very strained lives as well, the most marginalized, or people who are among the most marginalized. And this project is still going on, even though it's very, very difficult to run it, and sometimes the center has to close. But this is a project which gives children free music lessons twice a week, choir lessons, singing, instrumental lessons, learning to play various traditional Arabic instruments, and learning songs that come from their culture. And part of this is as for a kind of pride in culture. And these children come from refugee camps. They come from isolated villages, from poor communities in the city of Bethlehem. And it's an inclusive program, so it also includes, for example, children with disabilities. And it teaches the children in the orchestra to help each other to learn. So the older ones will teach the younger ones. The kids who have an easier time learning support the kids who have more difficulties learning. And this was the first concert that they had done for their community. So that's mainly their parents. And it's just a little bit of music and then fragments of interviews done with the children about how was that to be on the stage. And it's subtitled in English, so you can... Okay, here we go.
حسيت اني متوترة شوي، بعدين لما شفت الموضوع انه عادي وهيك هديت وصرت اعزف، كنت مبسوطة لما شفت عيلتي، هديت كثير. ولما شفت انه كل اشي يعني كثير حلو ومنيح، وكل الناس كانوا مبسوطين وكانوا يزقفوا، كثير انبسطت انا انه لما شفت الناس بتفاعلوا وهيك، كانوا كثير حلو.
كان شعوري متوتر، يعني كنت خايف، ولما تعودنا كنت خلاص تعودت صرنا نعزف كثير.
كنت متوترة كثير عشان أول مرة بطلع قدام جمهور كثير، وبعديها يعني خف توتري، وانبسطت كتير. حسيت عادي كانت حلوة كتير وعجبتني كتير وانبسطت لما رحت وخلص.
كأول مرة كانت تجربة كثير حلوة وهيك جديدة علي، بس برضو كانت بتوتر وفي شوية خوف كان لأنه كنت خايف وغلطت طبعا. غير إنه إحنا كانوا موجودين الناس اللي بعرفهم إشي كانت
كثير حلوة وخاصة لما شفت الجمهور وهم يزقفوني.
Wonderful. You talked there, and we sort of got a sense of it from some of the young people who were speaking about the idea of people helping each other. I think, each one teach one, that kind of feeling of passing on and supporting younger and less experienced people in the group. I mean, that feels like me that's part of your way of doing things. Yeah. And I'm just wondering, given all those different projects in different parts of the world with very different cultures, from Rwanda to Kosovo and North Macedonia and Palestine, does Musicians Without Borders, do you have a common way of doing things practically? You have your values, which we've talked about, but do you have an actual common methodology?
Well, we used to think we did. I mean, we used to think we had a kind of one way of doing things. And because we had developed a training, a methodology, an approach, and then there was sort of the idea of, well, if it works in Rwanda, it should work in Northern Ireland. Well, it didn't. Mm. So you learn. And I think what the projects all have in common with each other is that they're all trying to respond to a need, and they're all co-created with the local partners and the local musicians. So we get a request, and then we'll go and speak with the requesting organization or group or musicians, and learn, well, what is the situation here? What is the history? What are you doing? How do you think we might be able to help? Sometimes, as in this project, it really has to do with these very struggling people living under occupation. And at this point, the project in Palestine is still going on 2 days a week, but it's very difficult because there's so much trauma and there's so much stress. And sometimes the checkpoints are closed and the teachers can't get to the cultural center and that kind of thing. But that one is really about giving marginalized children and young people tools to feel that they are whole and that they're part of a group and that they have resilience. In a project in Kosovo that maybe we can talk about more, it's much more about giving young people who are in ethnically divided post-war spaces ways of meeting other young people who come from the other side and discovering that they really have a lot in common if they make music together. Mm. And then the focus is really about, okay, well, I really want to be a very good guitar player, or I want to sing. And so really giving them serious music education on the way to being able to play well in a rock band. And for that, for example, we've partnered with the Fontes Rock Academy in Tilburg from the very beginning, who have helped to develop the didactic and pedagogical tools there. And we were invited by UNICEF in El Salvador, who had heard about our work in Rwanda. They invited us to El Salvador to work with them on developing strategies to help protect children from the influence of violence, because they just lived in these very, very violent gang violence, drug violence, violence against women all around them. And so what we did was also using what we'd learned from all these other projects, together with the Salvadoran partners, created a training for music teachers who work in schools. Okay, how do you, from your school, your classroom, how do you create a space that you could say is a culture of nonviolence, in which the children feel that and are connected to each other. And how do we pull things out of your culture that will help to support that? And so that, that becomes, it's a very different kind of project, but they're all co-created. And then using the tools and developing new tools when necessary, but using the things that we've learned along the way. And then also, of course, just relying on the expertise and the knowledge of the people that we're working with. So it's really, and we do not consider ourselves to be a humanitarian organization, although, some people would say, yes, I mean, you're helping people. Yes, well, part of being a human is helping people, right? But we consider ourselves more to be building a global network of musicians who are all working for a peaceful world in various ways.
And when you're sending, you mentioned you collaborate with local organizations, local partners, and local musicians, but you're also sending musicians, presumably from the Netherlands, from Europe, etc.
When needed, not always now.
When needed. Oh, that's interesting. I'm just wondering how do you from the Netherlands work out how to get inside the needs and the culture of those different spaces?
Yeah,
and what do you learn?
Really, really good question. Because of course you come from a different culture, and even within our trainers group, we have people from different cultures. We have 2 Rwandans now who are trainers. I think they're actually this week in Luxembourg doing a week-long training in Luxembourg, and we have young trainers who've now become teachers in this rock school in Kosovo. When the project in Rwanda, the young people there wanted to make rock music. We didn't send somebody from Amsterdam or from Tilburg. We sent somebody from Kosovo, who was this young guy who had come in as a student and become one of the teachers. So it's trying to cross that and to find the elements that we share. I think it's that, so it's not necessarily that we have to learn everything about their culture, but we have to listen, and you have to listen all the time.
Yeah, listening it's very, very important. You mentioned the project in Kosovo, and that's also North Macedonia as well. Is that linked with, the projects are linked, I think, is it?
Yes, those 2 projects are linked. We started at the request of, I said earlier that we began during the war in Kosovo. And it's kind of funny because I always loved singing folk music, but we ended up in a divided city, which had a rock and roll history. And that divided city was very proud. There used to be a genre of music called Yugo rock. It came out of ex-Yugoslavia. And in that tradition, rock music was sort of the voice, the independent voice of young people, and was often very critical of political leaders, So this was a phenomenon there. And this city, which ends up being sort of the divide in northern Kosovo when the shooting war ends, this city was an industrial town that had a very thriving inter-ethnic rock music scene. And the first time I was there, that was a year after we started, and it was also a year after this last of the Balkan Wars. We started meeting musicians of all different kinds because everybody needed everything. There were no instruments anymore. There weren't so many teachers anymore. There wasn't any money. But we met rock musicians. And we met rock musicians, good musicians on both sides of the ethnic divide, who told us they remembered this old tradition, they missed it, and they knew that a lot of young people, teenage people, wanted to become rock musicians. They knew about their city's history. But they didn't have a place. They didn't have a way to get together. It was too dangerous to meet in the city. There's literally these 2 neighborhoods are divided by a river, and nobody crosses the bridges. And so we started talking with them and talking with local organizations, and it took a while. But in 2008, we finally had, it kept going, the tensions kept going up and down. The place we thought about kept not being available, blah, blah, all of those things. But in 2008, we thought, okay, well, if we can't bring the kids together in their own city, maybe we can bring them together in another place and not have a center, but just focus on the kids. And so what we did was we brought them to Skopje, Macedonia, which is about a 2.5-hour bus ride from Mitrovica. And Skopje has more or less the same ethnic makeup as Kosovo, but it wasn't in war, and people mix. And so this has grown into a project because every year, the high point of the year, well, when they first came together, it was amazing. Nobody knew what they were doing exactly, but we sent teachers and senior students from Fontes Rock Academy to coach this, and we brought these wonderful musicians from both sides of Mitrovica, and we brought, I don't remember, 25 or 30 kids from both sides. And it started out with a pop music quiz, and it ended up with a public rock music concert in the public park. And the first day, we put together ethnically mixed bands from both sides, kids from both sides, and we never talked about ethnicity. You have to figure out a name for your band, you have to figure out what covers you want to do, you have to rehearse, and then coach them the whole week. And kids had the best week of their lives. And when the week was over, they said, we want a rock school in Mitrovica. So that's how we started. We rented one room on the north side and one room on the south side. We found a little bit of money to do it. And now, these days, the Mitrovica Rock School is now an independent NGO in Kosovo. Wow. It has 2 locations that are like youth centers. They're much more than just rock schools. And there have been more than 2,000 kids who've come through this program and played in these bands, and all of them now have contacts on the other side.
Wow, that's wonderful. Let's see the film.
Okay, I got to jump.
When we first came here, we met some wonderful rock musicians who told us about the city's history as a rock music city and how they wanted to bring that back. And when we came up with the idea to set up a rock school, the idea was very clear, the goal was clear, the path was not so clear.
Mitrovica is a divided city, so we never saw each other because they don't come to the north, we don't come to the south. It's really bad for everybody because kids don't get to see the other culture and experience it, even though they should.
Music Connect is a beautiful idea. It was born after years of Mitrovica Rock School doing similar things, bringing people together through music.
So this is one of the only ways to meet each other, hang out, get to know a culture and someone new that we never saw before.
Sometimes, of course, a student is so young that the band coach needs to give him some options. But if you give him options, they still have to choose.
This is the perfect combination of being individual enough to share your thoughts with others, but being in a group of people which are like a family.
One of the goals is not just to connect young people, but also to connect them with each other across borders, with skills, with infrastructure to support them. So one of the things that Music Connects is going to do is support the development of that infrastructure, and that's the recording studios, but also people who need to work in them and know how to set the mics and how to make people sound good.
We had that training session, it was really good. The fact that he's a beginner.
It's my first time.
His first time, yeah, as a bass player, so it works really good.
I'm really excited for this, and I know it's going to be the greatest gig of all my life.
I've met some of the best people and musicians through this project, so I'm really thankful.
We're connecting.
I want people to hear my music, to be together, have fun, because music is such a peaceful thing. And that's the word, music connects people, music connects souls.
I was going to ask you about legacy of these projects. Now, that's a very clear one. There is a rock school. It's now an NGO. It has its own life. Is that what you aim for wherever you go, is that you leave something independent?
Yeah. A lot of the projects involve working with people who will then become the leaders of the project. We try to do it in such a way that it becomes sustainable in local communities, at least that the skills stay. The project in El Salvador, for example, we trained music teachers, but we also trained trainers. So something like 30 of the people who were involved in that training of the music teachers have now become the trainers as the project is being rolled out across the country. So they're training not only music teachers, but also just regular school teachers. How do you use music in your classroom to make these kids feel safe? How do you do that? Teaching a song, putting kids in a circle instead of straight rows, getting down on the floor with them and doing rhythm sticks and things like that. How do you do that? How do you lead such a process? How do you do it in such a way that nobody feels rejected or judged, that everybody feels recognized? And this, because this was a collaboration with UNICEF and also with the Ministry of Education, it has become a part of that system. We were very lucky in that. We don't always have that luck, but we always strive to work long-term wherever we are, because change takes time. And it takes time to learn where you are and what you're doing and who are your best partners and how do you best allow this to become something that people own, that is theirs, and that we can proudly support and help out and be there when we need to be, but we don't own it. We just share it.
And what about the hard facts, the facts and figures, the science of this? I guess in some aspects, you're talking about the effects of music on traumatized people.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any connection with neuroscience and the science of that and how music can affect, or do you have proofs of that? Is that something you're interested in, or is it all in the experience?
No, we are absolutely interested in it. We do what's called MEL, monitoring, evaluation, and learning in every project. So we keep track of who was there, how did the group behave, how did people respond to things. We use also interviewing techniques so that you can talk to kids and young people about what their experience was, how they felt before, how they felt after, sometimes longer types of interviews. And when budgets permit, as with this Music Connects project in the Balkans, and there's a budget, we bring in external evaluators. So the video I just showed of that period, that was evaluated by scholars from the universities of Melbourne and Brisbane, and they published a report, which is on our website. Currently, there's a researcher from SOAS in London who's examining this phase of the project and will put out a report. We can't always afford to do that, but we try to keep track. And a lot of it you just see by the fact that, when you start a rock school and 16 years later, more than half of the teachers are former students, and it's still pulling in kids who want to play music. Or these kids, the things that they said, we didn't set them up to say them. You're very happy that they say them, but we didn't set them up. And so, it's both. It's kind of both.
And so much of this is a message of real hope. Do you ever become overwhelmed at the scale and the really terrible things that are happening at the moment, and how war isn't seeming to end?
Yes, I do sometimes, and I have in the last year quite a lot. Also just because, it's not only in Palestine where things have gotten worse. We also have a project in Congo where things have gotten worse. And that's an amazing project where we're doing research together with a climate organization about how knowledge about the land is held in the traditional songs of the elders. So collecting the songs and then teaching them to the young children in the refugee camps, for example. So you're doing something that's kind of contra the white European Western scientists, climate scientists coming in and saying what needs to happen, but listening to what people know about their space and finding ways through the music to share that. But the group from Rwanda who's been doing a lot of the training, sometimes they can get in, sometimes they can't right now. And also because we're in contact with these people, they're friends, they're colleagues. I'm the one that gets called with updates from the Palestine project, from our project manager there, and it is overwhelming. I guess what I hold on to is the knowledge that what you do always counts. It always matters. Even if you change one life, even if you save one person, it matters. And the knowledge that history sometimes surprises us, and that change that happens for the good only happens because people are working to change things for the good. If you stop working, there's no choice. There's no chance. And we don't control the results anyway. We don't control what happens. You can only control what you do. And so I sometimes have to tell myself that more times per day than I used to. But that's what I believe. And I mean, when you look at sort of the course of history, and we don't know what's going to happen. Right now, the whole world is under threat because some of these, in my view, psychotic world leaders are threatening us all with, the possibility, the real possibility of nuclear war. And that'll be the end. But okay, I mean, if I knew the world would end tomorrow, I'd plant a tree today. That kind of, well, okay, it's a cliche, but that today that you can reach people, that you can put new ideas out there. And I think the power of music, the power of all the arts, but the power of music is to make that real for people, to make it understandable, and to be able to change and change processes, change communities, support communities in a way that is liberating and that is freeing, and because it touches not just your thinking processes, but it touches your heart, it touches your feelings, and that's where we need the most help.
And you've shown us today, just to finish, you've shown us today a very powerful way of being a musician in the world. We're in a conservatoire, we're in a place that trains musicians. What would you say to the conservatoire, and what would you say to those young musicians about how they can make a difference?
I think we're in a time in which I think everybody, or I hear more people than 10 years ago, are struggling with this, are looking for how can I do things that are meaningful in this world. I think we can all play a role, and we don't all have to do it in the same way. But I think that it's good to connect and look at which ways we can work together. For example, this last year, we had a collaboration, which is still there, with the Conservatorium van Amsterdam. And we have a project in the Netherlands where we send musicians out into what's called the emergency reception centers for people who are not given a space in asylum seeker centers because the Netherlands doesn't have enough spaces. That's a whole other story, but these are the most fragile people in migration here. And there was interest here in collaborating, and so we ran some short introductory trainings. I think Otto is here in the audience who was instrumental in those. We worked with Maartje and with Joachim to invite both teachers and students who were interested, and then gradually took people along with us as observers, not the whole group at once, but so to be part of that process and see what was happening. And I think this is interesting when institutions of music education, which all come out of the classical background or out of the classical history, and therefore can sort of only direct you in the direction of the Concertgebouw. But when this question arises, because it was your initiative. Huh? So we have people here who want to be more involved in society, who have a feeling that music can do good things for the society, could we look for ways of working together? That's the best I can say. I also love going to amazing concerts with musicians who can play beautifully. And I think we need that inspiration too. But I think that everybody in the world, and musicians have a special way of doing that, need to look at what can we do with our talents to save the world in whichever way we can.
Well, we can't ask anything higher or greater than that of an artist. Laura, thank you very much. You've been a real inspiration. Thank you.
Thank you.